Behavioural economics on a post-it number 33. In this little video, I'm going to talk about the concept of what's called motivational crowding. I think these days, motivational crowding, at least in terms of the empirical work around this concept, is probably most associated with Bruno Frey, who's done a lot of work around how people's motivations can be crowded out by money. Now, I guess the assumption or the concept of motivational crowding is a challenge to what's called the relative price mechanism in standard economic theory. That is to say that you pay people to do something, then they're more likely to do it. And if you penalise them financially, then they're less likely to do it. That people are only motivated by monetary concerns in those sorts of ways is a bit of a caricature of standard economic theory. But nonetheless, let's just go with that assumption in this particular post-it, just to demonstrate the concept of motivational crowding. So, although as I've just said, motivational crowding is associated strongly with the work of Bruno Frey during the 1980s and 1990s and onwards, it has an older history. Probably dates back a long way, but at least until the time of Richard Titmuss, famous professor at my own school, at the London School of Economics, who wrote essentially around the concept of motivational crowding in relation to blood donation, suggesting that people do some things for non-financial motivations. They're altruistically motivated to do some particular things. Not everything in their lives, but some things in their lives. They're motivated for reasons other than financial motivations, and they could be altruistic motivations. There may be other motivations as well. But let's just think about demonstrating this concept just in terms, potentially, of blood donation. That Titmuss, with some basic empirical data where he compared the United States and the United Kingdom, suggested that paying people to donate blood was not necessarily a good idea. At the time that he was writing, people could be paid to donate blood in the United States, and they had to, it was done on a voluntary basis in the United Kingdom. So what Titmuss is suggesting is that, or what motivational crowding suggests, is that in some circumstances, if you increase the price that you offer for a particular thing, it could be an activity or it could be a good or whatever, then you'll get a decrease in supply of that particular thing beyond a certain price point, which conflicts with usual assumptions in standard economic theory, right? And therefore you can have what's called a backward sloping supply curve, if you like, right? So if you just think about this in terms of blood donation. If you didn't pay anything for people to donate blood, if it was a purely voluntary activity, then we know that you get a certain supply of blood, don't we? We get a certain quantity. We know that from practices that are observed in particular countries. People donate blood for probably for altruistic motivations, possibly. Whether it's pure altruism is debatable, I think. People are intrinsically probably getting something out of it, even if it's not money. There might be reputation or a feeling that they're doing good for other people and they want to be recognised for doing that. But anyway, let's just put that to one side. People donate blood, it seems, if this is supply of blood, for purely non-financial reasons, right? Now, you could increase the price, so we could offer some money for people to donate blood. And it might be that some people then stop doing it because, it conflicts with their altruistic motivations, if they do have altruistic motivations. They're non-financial motivations. It might be that some people might be enticed to donate blood if you offer some money. And even those that do it for sort of non-financial reasons, they might feel an element that they're being sort of appreciated if you offer them a small financial incentive. So they may continue to do it. So you might get an increase in supply to a certain point. But if you keep increasing the price, it might be the case that those people that are non-financially motivated stop donating blood. Others might be enticed in, but those that were non-financially motivated might look for other avenues to satisfy their non-financial motivations. They might think that, okay, you're paying me to do this now. That's not the reason that I'm doing it. I'm going to stop doing it, and I'm going to devote those activities to, devote those energies to other activities instead. So overall, even though some people might be enticed in by, offering a certain amount of money for you to donate blood, it might be that those people that now look elsewhere to satisfy their non-financial motivations outweigh those that are enticed into the blood donation market, so to speak. And therefore, you might get a backward sloping supply curve. You might actually get a reduction in the total amount of blood that's being donated. Right? Beyond a particular price point, it may, however, be the case that more and more people are enticed into donating blood. If you offer £10,000, for example, for people to donate blood, then you can be pretty sure you're going to get a pretty big, blood supply. A large body of people who are willing to donate blood if you offer very significant financial inducements, and therefore you might get a twist again back to the direction of a normal, what in standard economic theory you'd expect to be a normal sloping, an upward sloping supply curve, increasing the price, increasing the quantity. So you can see that if people have non-financial motivations, then by increasing the price of a particular good, I've used blood obviously hypothetically in this case, then you may get what's called motivational crowding out, right? A backward sloping supply curve, less supply, motivational crowding. And this is just what I've written here really. Many people may do some activities for intrinsic or even altruistic reasons, right? And I've put donating blood there as an example. And therefore, if you pay them to do it, their reason for doing it is lost, and they might do less of it. Right? So Bruno Frey has done a lot of experiments, as I've said, on the notion of motivational crowding out. One example was he looked at whether people would be willing to accept a nuclear waste repository in their local area in Switzerland. And he found that if you started to pay people significant amounts of money to accept a nuclear waste repository in their local area, that then as a population, people were less likely to accept a nuclear waste repository in their local area than if you ask them to do it on an entirely voluntary basis. There might be a different motivational force going on there, perhaps, than one of one that might be classified as altruism, right? Might not be that people are having their altruism crowded out. It might be that if you start offering significant financial inducements for particular activities or to accept particular practices, then people may become increasingly suspicious that those practices might be imposing on them some form of harm, right? A medical related example of that might be that if you pay people to engage in drug trials, if you offer them very significant amounts of money to engage in the drug trial, then perhaps you might expect less people to sign up because they might be increasingly suspicious that the payments are there to try to offset some expected significant harm that they might experience from engaging in those trials. So that's the notion of motivational crowded out. Pure financial motivations can be crowded out. Intrinsic motivations can be crowded out by the promise of money in particular circumstances.